Welcome back to the second part of the narrative of Mary Prince, an enslaved woman from Bermuda. I'll continue to read. My master was a Captain I who lived at Spanish Town. After parting with my mother and sister, I followed him to his store, and he gave me into the charge of his son, a lad about my own age, Master Benji, who took me to my new home. I did not know where I was going or what my new master would do with me. My heart was quite broken with grief, and my thoughts went back continually to those from whom I had been so suddenly parted. Oh, my mother, I kept saying to myself. Oh, my mammy and my sisters and my brothers, shall I never see you again? Oh, the trials, the trials. They make the salt water come into my eyes when I think of the days in which I was afflicted, the times that are gone when I mourned and grieved with a young heart for those whom I loved. It was night when I reached my new home. The house was large and built at the bottom of a very high hill, but I could not see much of it that night. I saw too much of it afterwards. The stones and timber were the best things in it. They were not so hard as the hearts of the owners. Before I entered the house, two enslaved women hired from another owner who were at work in the yard spoke to me and asked who I belonged to. I replied, I come to live here. Poor child, they both said. You must keep a good heart if you are to live here. When I went in, I stood up crying in a corner. Mrs. I came and took off my hat, a little black silk hat Miss Prudence made for me, and said in a rough voice, You're not come here to stand up in corners and cry. You're come here to work. She then put a child into my arms, and as tired as I was forced instantly to take up my old occupation of a nurse. I could not bear to look at my mistress. Her countenance was so stern. She was a stout, tall woman with a very dark complexion, and her brows were always drawn together in a frown. I thought of the words of the two enslaved women when I saw Mrs. I, and I heard the harsh sound of her voice. The person I took the most notice of that night was a French black woman called Hetty, whom my master took in privateering from another vessel, or piracy, and made her his slave. She was the most active woman I've ever saw, and she was tasked at her utmost. A few minutes after my arrival, she came in from milking the cows and put the sweet potatoes on for supper. Then she fetched home the sheep and penned them in the fold, drove home the cattle, and staked them around the pond side, fed and rubbed down my master's horse, and gave the hog and feed cows their suppers, prepared the beds and undressed the children, and laid them to sleep. I liked to look at her and watch all her doings, for hers was the only friendly face I had yet seen, and I felt glad that she was there. She gave me my supper of potatoes and milk and a blanket to sleep upon. She spread it for me in the passage before the door of Mrs. I's chamber. I got a sad fright that night. I was just going to sleep when I heard a noise in my mistress's room, and she presently called out to inquire if some work was finished that she had ordered Hetty to do. No, ma'am, not yet, was Hetty's answer from below. On hearing this, my master started up from his bed, and just as he was in his shirt, ran downstairs with a long cow skin in his hand. I heard immediately after the cracking of the thong, and the house rang to the shrieks of poor Hetty, who kept crying out, Oh, massa, me dead, massa, have mercy upon me, don't kill me outright. This was a sad beginning for me. I sat upon my blanket, trembling with terror, like a frightened hound, and thinking that my turn would come next. At length, the house became still, and I forgot for a little while all my sorrows by falling asleep. The next morning, my mistress set out about instructing me in my tasks. She taught me to do all sorts of housework, to wash and bake, pick cotton and wool, and wash floors and cook. And she taught me how can I ever forget it? More things than these. She caused me to know the exact difference between the smart of the rope, the cart whip, and the cow skin when applied to my naked body by her own cruel hand. And there was scarcely any punishment more dreadful than the blows I received on my face and head from her hard, heavy fist. She was a fearful woman and a savage mistress to her slaves. There were two little enslaved boys in the house on whom she vented her bad temper in a special manner. One of these children was a mulatto called Cyrus, who was bought while an infant in his mother's arms. The other, Jack, was an African from the coast of Guinea, whom a sailor had given or sold to the master. Seldom a day passed without those boys receiving the most severe treatment, and often for no fault at all, both by my master and mistress. They seemed to think they had a right to ill-use them at their pleasure, and very often accompanied their commands with blows, whether the children were behaving well or ill. I've seen their flesh ragged and raw with licks. Lick, lick. They were never secure one moment from a blow, and their life was passed in continual fear. My mistress was not contented with using the whip, but often pinched their cheeks and arms in the most cruel manner. My pity for these poor boys was soon transferred to myself, for I was licked and flogged and pinched by her pitiless fingers in the neck and arms exactly as they were. To strip me naked, to hang me up by the wrists, and lay my flesh open with a cowskin was an ordinary punishment for even a slight offense. My mistress often robbed me too of the hours that belonged to sleep. She used to sit up very late, frequently until morning, and I had to then stand at a bench and wash during the greater part of the night, or pick wool and cotton, and often I have dropped down, overcome by sleep and fatigue, till roused by from a state of stupor by the whip, and forced to start up to my tasks. Poor Hetty, my fellow slave, was very kind to me, and I used to call her my aunt. But she led a most miserable life, and her death was hastened, at least that's what the enslaved said and believed, and said so by the dreadful chastisement she received from my master during her pregnancy. It happened as follows. One of the cows had dragged the rope away from the stake to which Hetty had fastened it and got loose. My master flew into a terrible passion and ordered the poor creature to be stripped quite naked, notwithstanding her pregnancy, and to be tied to a tree in the yard. He then flogged her as hard as he could lick, both with the whip and cowskin, till she was all over streaming with blood. He rested and then beat her again and again. Her shrieks were terrible. The consequences was that poor Hetty was brought to bed before her time and was delivered after a severe labor of a dead child. She appeared to recover after the confinement so far that she was repeatedly flogged by both master and missus afterwards, but her former strength never returned to her. Ere long, her body and limbs swelled to a great size, and she lay on a mat in the kitchen till the water burst out of her body and she died. All the enslaved said the death was a good thing for poor Hetty, but I cried very much for her death. The manner of it filled me with horror. I could not bear to think about it, yet it was always present to my mind for many a days. I'll stop here. Thanks for listening.